Hey, I heard that everyone's looking for you, and I just...
Please come home. Please tell us that you're all right. Everybody's worried about you.
Paige, I hope you're really not missing. I just saw something on TV. Oh, my God, what happened?
In the summer of 2007, in Grand Junction, Colorado, a devoted single mother, Paige Bergfeld, suddenly disappeared. Those around her were immediately worried.
Something is definitely wrong. She either got abducted or an accident. I think she got abducted.
I think there was a lot of confusion when Paige Bergfeld went missing, and the community really started to feel shock when we discovered that she was living a secret life as an escort.
Yeah, this is John, Motel 6, room 237. I was just checking to see if you had somebody coming out or not. Thank you.
One of her clients was a local repairman, Lester Ralph Jones. He'd previously been jailed for abducting and assaulting his ex-wife, Lisa.
I just couldn't believe that this was happening all over again, you know, and that somebody else was probably hurt by him.
Lisa had fled from her hometown after the attack and hoped never to see her ex again.
But he said, "I'm going to kill you." And then he just like slapped me over and over. And I could feel like blood, you know, and I could feel my lips swelling. I mean, I just feel like I'm lucky to be.
In 2014, Lisa Nance heard her ex-husband, Lester Ralph Jones, had been charged with murdering missing soccer mom, Paige Bergfeld.
I thought it was very possible, yeah. I mean, no one knew that he had this dark side to him but me. And I knew that if, in fact, she didn't want to see him no more or she tried to get away from him, I could definitely see it happening. I got a subpoena in 2016. The police where I lived brought it over, and it said that I have to go to court to testify again, you know, in this trial. And I didn't want to. I asked them if I could not go, and they said, "No, you have to." I was nervous and scared about seeing him. I hadn't seen him since 1999, so it had been almost 20 years since I'd seen him, so I was pretty nervous about facing him. I had put my life with him behind me, and I hadn't thought about it or anything until that Paige come up missing, and then it kind of all come back. And then when I had to come and testify, then it all just came back. I didn't talk about this for a long time. No one knew. No one but my family knew what I had went through until I had to go testify. I mean, I had kept it, you know, all to myself for all those years. I didn't, you know, no one knew anything because I didn't want no one to know.
When Lisa Nance first met Lester Ralph Jones, she was instantly attracted to him.
He was handsome. I mean, that's the first thing you noticed about him back then. He was handsome. He was kind. He was just really sweet. And it just kind of took off from there. I was a stay-at-home mom, and Ralph had a business in Hotchkiss. It was called Ralph's Repair. I think we met like toward the end of '96, and then we went out, you know, a couple times, and we hung out, all, you know, me and the kids and him. We went places, we did things.
She's 28 years old. She's got 2 young children. He's 17 years older. He seems established. He comes across to her as very sweet. And of course, for her, the attraction is, it's all very upfront and transparent.
I was divorced. I had 2 small children, and I think one was probably 2 and one was 4 or something like that. They were pretty young. He was good to my kids. He treated them like his own. When we got married, we went to Loveland. It was me, him, and my 2 children. And we just went to the courthouse and got married. And then I think we all went to eat, and then we just come back the next morning. It was just the 4 of us.
Lisa meets Lester, and she falls in love with him, finds him very sweet and kind, and about 6 or 7 months in, they decide to get married. And that does feel very whirlwindy, because it's a very short space of time. You're still in that kind of honeymoon phase with your rose-tinted glasses on. And if it's both of you in that phase, then it can be fantastic. But what it does do is you're blinded from seeing any potential red flags at that particular point in time.
I had a trailer, and we just moved it out on some property that he owned, just like a few miles from Hotchkiss, and we moved it out there, and we just all moved in. He didn't tell me much about his family. I didn't really know much about it. I met his dad, his brother, and his sister, but that's all. The only one I knew about was his ex-wife. I mean, I knew about her, I didn't know her. He just said that they were married for, I forgot, I don't know how many years, like over 20 years, I think. They had 2 boys.
From Lisa's own description, Lester was very lovely to the children. So if you think about that as her vision of her future relationship, it looks rosy.
He worked at that Rouse Repair, and then he drove a bus in the mornings and the afternoons. The only thing we ever really done was come to Oklahoma to see my family. And sometimes we would go to Montrose and see his family. But that was really all that we ever did, because we weren't together very long.
Lisa's marriage to Lester Ralph Jones went sour within months of their impromptu wedding.
He would lie about just simple things about where he was and where he went. And then I would find out later it wasn't true, that he did not go there. Probably just not long into the marriage, maybe a few months. There was just things that he did that were so sneaky. Like one time I put my ring down to do dishes, and when I went back to get it, I never seen it again. And I asked him if he'd seen my ring, and he's like, no, I haven't seen it. But I know he had to take it. There was no one else that could have got it.
There's something in there that tells me that Lisa is very good at picking up on stuff, questioning him about it. He comes back with some deflective answer, and she pushes that to the back of her mind. And I think this is just the beginning of a small whisper of a red flag that I think at this point in time, Lisa is justifying. That, okay, maybe he's just forgotten, maybe.
And then he started like monitoring my phone calls. We had one of them little caller IDs that you have back then, you know, and he put one back behind the TV so that he would know who I talked to. He would ask me who I talked to during the day, and then if I failed to mention someone, you know, he'd be like, well, I know you talked to so-and-so. Well, then I couldn't understand how he was figuring out, you know, who I was talking to. And then one morning he got up to go to work, and I got up too, and I seen him behind the TV doing something, and I thought, I wonder what he's doing. So when he left, I got back there and looked, and I found it.
Lisa started to pick up, I think quite early on, that Lester was lying about all kinds of things, from small stuff to bigger stuff. And he was spending an awful lot of time away from home. And then this behavior started then to escalate.
That's when I noticed he was like watching me, you know, like if I wanted to go somewhere, you know, he would show up there. Like one of my friends' house, I went to her house, and he showed up at the front door, following me, things like that. I just didn't want to be with him anymore. I couldn't stand all the questions and all the, you know, questioning me about where I was at, what I was doing, watching my phone calls, getting my mail, stuff like that. He was jealous. He was always jealous. Yeah.
10 years later, in the city of Grand Junction, Lester Ralph Jones came onto the radar of detectives investigating the disappearance of a local soccer mom, Paige Bergfeld.
Dispatch, this is Clint.
Yes, I need to talk about a missing person emergency. She's 33, and she's definitely missing because she would never leave her children.
The night that Paige Bergfeld was last seen, she was supposed to come home and take over the duties of being a mom from the nanny. But that didn't happen.
So the big mystery that happened when Paige went missing is, she didn't go home, and the next day her kids showed up to the sheriff's office with a nanny to report her missing. At that point, we didn't know if she was just missing and hadn't come home or if something nefarious had happened.
Hey, I'm at the corner of 23 and Logos, and there is a car on fire in the parking lot at the building right here.
When Paige's car was found burning, it was very suspicious. We had gotten reports from others that had seen the car in that same parking lot earlier in the day, and it was not on fire.
Do you see flames or smoke?
Yeah, there's a lot of flames, but there's nobody around that I could see.
Before Paige's car was found on fire, this was just another missing persons case. But immediately, when her vehicle was found, investigators knew there was some foul play here involved.
We realized that it was probably a kidnapping or a murder. When they put the fire out, they were able to recover her day planner out of the back of the car, which hadn't been burned, and there were some pages missing from the day planner, specifically the pages that both in the day section and in the month section of the day planner, the pages for those dates that she went missing were ripped out.
Grand Junction police had found the burnt-out car belonging to missing local mom, Paige Bergfeld, but there was no sign of her, alive or dead.
Once we discovered that her car was on fire and went to her house and found her voice messages and found her second phone, we realized the double life she had, and then the suspect list opened up very quickly to all of the possible people that might have had a motive through her work to do something to her.
Within days, investigators got a tip-off that there were other men in Paige's life that very few people knew about.
Police started piecing together more information about Paige, a secret life that only a few of her friends even knew about.
Paige's double life was running an escort business. We got various reports about whether there was sexual activity, how much sexual activity that was part of it. But it was a pretty prominent list of people in town that had been frequenting her.
I'm at the Country Inn, and I was just calling to see if anybody's still available for the night. My number is 307.
Supposed to have two ladies over here for a bachelor party at 9 o'clock.
Please give me a call back. I'm going to go get me a motel room now.
One of the main phone numbers that we were able to track down that was contacting Paige was a track phone. It was a phone that you could buy at a gas station. This particular one was bought at a Walmart store, and it was a prepaid phone that wasn't associated to any person.
Next message.
Yeah, this is Jim. Just calling to see if Carrie was available tonight. You can call me back, let me know. 719.
Once investigators started to figure out the other businesses, the side hustles that Paige Bergfeld had going, it complicated this entire case. Because now we know that Paige was having correspondence and messages and meeting with a lot of different guys that probably didn't want anyone to know they were meeting.
The client, calling himself Jim, had made a number of calls to Paige's business phone number on the evening she went missing.
Next message.
Yeah, this is Jim. Just being impatient. I got my room. Give me a call back.
Next message.
This is Jim. I tried calling you last night. Maybe I left a wrong impression on you. I do want you to call me, but it's been since last night. Come around, give me a call.
End of message.
When investigators looked into the calls from Jim, they discovered the phone had been bought by a local mechanic called Lester Ralph Jones.
A search warrant was conducted of his worksite. In that worksite, they found a lot of very interesting items. There was a scale made by Pampered Chef that was at his worksite, which really didn't have any place there. There was a ledger where he was keeping track of women that he was frequenting for sexual favors. He would keep track of them by their description, physical description, which would include their breast cup size and their, estimated height and weight. He very clearly had an interest in people that were the same size and shape of Paige.
There was a ton of pressure on investigators in Mesa County to press charges in this case. They had identified someone they considered to be a person of interest, but investigators didn't have Paige Bergfeld's remains.
There are ways you can prosecute a homicide case without a body, but it's very difficult. And in a situation where you have a woman living a double life, we knew that we were subject to the argument of, how do you know she's not living a triple life? How do you know she's not still alive and somewhere else?
Lester Jones worked in the community. He was a quiet man that kept to himself and a bit mysterious. So just like all of the other leads in this case, these things were happening in the background, but there was so much white noise involving the search for Paige Bergfeld that until an arrest was made, there wasn't much to know about Lester Jones until we started digging in.
Lester Jones was a very large man. He was, I think, at least 6'4", 6'5", heavy set. He was a very strong man, somebody who would have been able to easily overpower a small female like Paige. Lester Jones denied any involvement in her disappearance from the beginning. The first interview, he absolutely denied everything except that he had been to see Paige Bergfeld. By the second interview, he was a little more forthcoming about that, and that's when he was confronted with the use of the track phone. But even after being shown a photograph of him buying the track phone, he adamantly denied that he was the one buying it. He claimed that he was there at the Walmart buying a soda.
What the investigators could prove was that Lester Ralph Jones had done something like this before.
He had been involved in a series of incidents involving his earlier wife, Lisa Nance, where he had kidnapped her, followed her.
By now, living far away from Colorado, Lisa Nance got an unexpected call.
My sister-in-law called me and said, "Oh my God, there's a girl missing in Grand Junction and they are looking at Ralph, or they think he might be a person of interest." I went home and you know how Fox News, it was on Fox News. That's how I heard her name, and that she was missing and that he had some kind of tie to her, And then a little time later, Grand Junction authorities got a hold of me and they wanted me to come to Colorado to take them up where he took me because they couldn't find her body. And they were just looking for ideals of where she could be. So I went up there and I did that, but that's not where they found her, but that's where we went to look.
Back in 1997, Lester Ralph Jones, Lisa's husband of just a few months, had been becoming increasingly controlling and secretive.
He worked all the time. He didn't get home until 7 or 8 o'clock. I think his hobbies were that he liked to fly. I know he took flying lessons and he liked to fly. Sometimes he would do that. I know he flew to Oklahoma to pick up my mother and brought her to Colorado to see me. He had a key to my post office box. He was getting my phone bills and going through my phone calls. And then I just didn't want it anymore, so I asked him to leave. And then that's when everything just went awful. He didn't want to leave, he didn't want to end it, and I did. And it went worse from there.
Research shows us that the most dangerous time for a person in an abusive relationship is when they've asked their partner to leave or when they've left the partner themselves.
He would call me on my phone and he'd be like, "Where are you at?" I wouldn't tell him that I was at my friend's house because I just didn't want him. I didn't want him to come around and so I would tell him I was somewhere else, and then When I got ready to leave, he was at the front door, or he just always seemed to know where I was at.
You are saying to them, I no longer want to spend any more time with you. I no longer want to be treated like this by you. And they can't handle it because their thinking about the situation is so rigid, and it's all about them having dominance and control and power over you. And they can't handle the fact that you've broken that pattern. And so you don't know then what they're capable of.
The whole time up until I asked him to leave, he never acted like he would harm me. When I started kind of seeing somebody else, that's when he kind of went, crazy.
I think the most insidious thing that happens once Lester has left is that he continues to spy on her, stalk her, and watch her every move. She spends the evening with this guy watching films. The whole family fall asleep. They get up at 4 a.m. He wants to go home. She says, I'll drive you home. Lester has been watching the whole thing the whole time. And then when Lisa is driving her friend home, she realizes that there's somebody following them.
He followed us all the way to Peonia. Like, we were driving so fast trying to get away from him. And then we turned down this kind of side road, and he followed us, and then he passed me, and he got in front of me and hit his brakes. And kind of like, first he sideswiped me and kind of knocked me off into the ditch. The airbags went off. We couldn't open the doors, they were jammed. Ralph gets out of the car and he comes back there and he hangs onto my shirt. And this guy was like, oh my God, we got to get out of here, So he rolls the window down and he's like, let's go. And he was trying to pull me out the car, but we couldn't get out because Ralph had me. So he said, I'm gonna go get help. So he took off running. Ralph shot at him twice. We didn't know if he'd hit him or anything.
After forcing Lisa at gunpoint to drive away from the scene, she persuaded her estranged husband to let her use her phone to arrange collection of her wrecked car.
So I went over there and I called 911. And they come and picked him up, took him to jail, and I went home. And then when he got out of jail, there was a restraining order put on him, but it didn't stop him. Every time I would drive somewhere, I would always see him parked, like if I drove to the grocery store, I would see his car parked somewhere, So I don't know how he knew where I was at all the time, but he did.
And I think with this particular individual, it sounds like some of his behavior was coming from a place of self-righteous annihilation. If I can't have you, no one else can.
Back then, I was like, oh my God, there he is again, I just didn't think that he was capable of what he was capable of. I was very scared. But I don't think that I realized how bad it was then.
Lester Ralph Jones's behaviour was getting out of control. He'd already had a restraining order against him, but he continued to stalk his ex-wife, Lisa.
And one night I was in the back room and I come out of my bedroom and nothing was on but the TV. And he was just sitting on the couch, just sitting there. I didn't even hear him, nothing. And I said, Ralph, what are you doing here? And he wouldn't talk, he wouldn't say anything. And he just acted different, he looked different, everything was different about him. And I knew that I probably should get out of the house, get out in public. I said, let's go eat. So he's like, okay. So we left and he put me in my car and he got in the driver's seat and we started driving.
I think at this point he's become incredibly threatening to her in his behavior, and she doesn't quite know how to manage him. She's absolutely terrified of this guy and has found an incredibly intelligent strategy to make sure she's not left on her own with him for any period of time.
I started to cry because he wouldn't talk, he wouldn't say nothing. And I kept asking, where are we going? He wouldn't say nothing. So we got to Cedar Ridge, and that was the last town there was before you headed up to the Mesa. to no other towns. So we went past Cedar Ridge and we headed up. And I said, we're not going to eat, are we? And he said, no. And I said, what are you going to do? And he said, I'm going to kill you.
Can you imagine how absolutely petrified Lisa must be at this particular point? That this is his sole intention, to obliterate her.
And then he just like slapped me over and over. And I could feel like blood, you know, and I could feel my lips swelling. I thought he was going to kill me because he was slapping me over and over and telling me he was going to kill me and tell me what he was going to do with me. He was going to put me in a lake where nobody would find me. And all I could think about, God, I can't swim. This is really going to be bad, you know? So I kind of went in that mode. I got to do something, you know, to get out of this. I mean, yeah, because I was scared to death. He said, you don't love me no more. You don't want me no more. And I was like, no, I do. And then he pulled over. And he said, if you love me, then you don't have to prove it. So he wanted me to like climb over there and have sex with him. But my car was like little and we couldn't. And I said, let's go back and get a room, a motel room, and we'll talk about it.
It is astonishing how Lisa strategically gets him into a position where it becomes about let's go to a motel or let's have sex, anything to disengage him from his plan to kill her.
We drive kind of like toward Montrose, and he pulled into that last motel. And he said, are you going to be here when I get back? And I said, yes. So he went in to get a motel room. And when he got in that, you know, like you walk in the first door and then the second door. Once he got in that second door, I climbed over in the passenger seat and I drove back to Delta. And I drove as fast as I could drive.
Days later, after a manhunt that spanned several states, Lester Ralph Jones was arrested.
There was multiple incidents that involved him kidnapping her, and then she escaped. Then he tracked them down and shot at and actually hit her lover. And then in a later incident, he actually took a plane and tracked her to Oklahoma. All in all, he ended up getting convicted of a variety of felonies out of that and served some prison time.
They put him in jail, and then they charged him with attempted murder and then kidnapping and sexual assault of me. And I think he got sentenced to 10 years. He wrote me letters. I mean, he wrote me lots and lots of letters. Like every day I was getting 3 and 4 letters, just begging me to come back and not to leave him and stuff like that.
I mean, this is obsessive amount of contact, and he's remorseful and he's apologetic and he's trying to do the loving kind thing, which is typical of an abuser. It's, you know, I'm so remorseful, please forgive me, kind of come back to me, and then builds back up into this brooding rage and then abuse. And I think when he's in jail, it feels like he's in that remorse space and she's not buying into it, which is why the phone calls then stop.
His disappearance, Lester Jones was married. He had stopped working in the firefighting industry and had become an auto mechanic for an RV shop and was working at an RV store that was actually across the street from where Page's car was found burning. Through the investigation, we learned that he had been married for some time to his new wife and that she was out of town when Page went missing. One of our best pieces of evidence was the computer forensics. In addition to looking at the phone forensics, we were able to get into his computer and confirm the dates and times that he was on his computer. We were able to confirm that every morning, Lester Jones would have the same pattern. He would speak to his wife, who was out of town, and he would speak to her from the landline, so he knew he was at his house, and from her cell phone. Then he would get on his computer and he would look at pornography, and we were able to figure out which pornographic sites he was looking at. And then he would go to work and he would come back home and he would do the same thing. So the one anomaly of that was Thursday evening was the only time that after work he did not come home and get on his computer and look at pornography. And that was the evening that Paige went missing.
I just kind of thought, oh my God, that could have been me, you know? I mean, I had a feeling that if she was missing, that it was probably a horrible death. I mean, because I know how terrified I was. So.
In March of 2012, a hiker in kind of a canyon area out in the desert stumbles across what the hiker believes to be human remains. Stories about Paige Bergfeld and the disappearance were routinely on the local news. It was a story that everyone was talking about. And so not just the anniversaries of her birthday or when she was last seen, but we were constantly doing stories because they were uncovering possible sightings, or there would be information that remains were being discovered throughout the years. It never turned out to be Paige Bergfeld until 2012.
They had found bones spread out about 1.2 miles that had been in this wash area, sort of a deserty area, and the rain had probably washed her bones out, so the smaller bones like fingers and other things that are lighter were further down away from that. One of the most interesting things we found when we found her remains was her skull had duct tape around it.
I remember it being a colder evening as the sun was going down and very windy, and so we couldn't hear what was happening just on the other side of the sagebrush from us, but you could almost sense a tense feeling with so much investigative resources out here in the middle of nowhere.
Forensic analysis established that these were in fact missing Paige Bergfeld's remains.
We were never able to prove exactly how or why Paige was killed. But one thing we do know is that you don't put duct tape on somebody who's deceased. So we knew that at the point that she was duct taped, she was kidnapped and alive. There would be no other reason to duct tape somebody's mouth shut. So that indicated a kidnapping, and in Colorado there's a version of first-degree murder called felony murder, which if somebody dies during the course of a kidnapping, it's a first-degree murder.
It was breaking huge news in Western Colorado and really across the country. So many people were following this story when investigators finally made an arrest, and they arrested Lester Jones and charged him with murder.
In July 2016, Lester Ralph Jones stood trial at the Mesa County Justice Center for the kidnap and murder of Paige Bergfeld.
I worked for a local television station that asked me to cover this trial for Lester Jones in Colorado. This was already a story that all of us in Colorado knew about, this missing mother. So when I was able to get into a television newsroom and start covering this case after she'd been missing for so many years, it was nearly an entire decade of my career at one point or another dealing with the Paige Bergfeld case.
It was the longest trial I had ever done. It was 7 weeks long. So the case against Lester Jones was really putting together a variety of little bits and pieces here and there. It started with the car being found burning practically across the street from his worksite. The track phone was one of the very few phones that was in contact with Paige. And so it was something that the person who was in possession of that track phone would have had the ability to know where she was and did communicate with her. There was an interview we conducted with one of her friends who had reported that she had gone to visit Lester Jones at Paige's request because Paige had been freaked out by him. And so there was a variety of these little things that if you add them all together, they show that he was really one of the very few people who could have known where Paige was, who had a motive and had the opportunity to kill her.
The prosecution's star witness in this case against Lester Jones is actually Lester Jones' ex-wife, Lisa Nance.
It had been 20 years since I had seen Ralph. I mean, I hadn't talked about it with anybody for 20 years, except just my family. And then when I got subpoenaed, then I knew everybody was going to know about it.
It's always difficult in cases like this because it's a risk to introduce prior criminal conduct. One of the things Lisa Nance told us was that she had been kidnapped by Lester Jones. She had been taken up on the Grand Mesa, which is a mountain that's very close to Grand Junction, and he reported that he was going to kill her and bury her in a lake. We were able to convince the judge that this was similar enough in this situation to the kidnapping of Paige Bergfeld and the burying of her body, not in a lake, but in a creek bed. And we were able to get that into evidence and to use that to show that he had a pattern of doing this to women who looked very strikingly similar to Paige.
At first, I didn't want to think that he had done that, but I mean, I could definitely see how he could. I mean, I could definitely see that he could definitely do it after what he had done to me. The prosecutor just asked me to tell him about what Ralph had done to me back in 1999. He just wanted me to go over that, and that was it. I was nervous, and my stomach was, upset, and I was nervous. And talking about it, I started to cry, because it just brings back so many, scary times, and especially when I thought that I was not going to come home and I was never going to see my kids again. That was the worst part, The hardest part to talk about was that.
Clearly, there is a big part of her that does not want to see this person ever again. She feels very threatened and frightened of him, and then being put back into that situation brings those horrible memories flooding back. And what she's describing is that kind of the physiological response of feeling sick and the sense of threat. So she's almost in this kind of fight, flight, and fright state all at once. It's like I've got to be here. I've got to give evidence. I want to run away, and I'm also frozen by having to even think about looking at him. All of that is happening at once.
I did not look at him face to face. We never made eye contact, so whether he looked at me, I don't know. But I tried not to look over that direction.
Lisa got through the ordeal of testifying, but it was not over yet.
The first jury was deadlocked at 11-1. According to the people that were in the room, they were just unable to convince one member of the jury to find Lester Jones guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. So the judge had to call a mistrial.
When they came back with the hung jury, I didn't understand, what the problem was. I was nervous and scared, and I didn't want to have to go through it again.
At the end of the first trial, I knew I had to retry the case. I knew that this was not something that I could just say, well, we tried and couldn't get there.
It was very difficult to testify again. I mean, I did it the first time okay, so the second time, I was nervous, but it went okay. I knew what to expect the second time around.
In Colorado, if there's a hung jury, it's a mistrial's declared, and the defendant has a right to be tried within 90 days. So we had to reset the trial and do a second trial. And that trial began the Monday before Thanksgiving. The jury actually started deliberating just before Christmas and deliberated for a few days, came back after the Christmas holiday, and came back with a guilty verdict about 2 days after Christmas.
Lester Jones didn't make any outbursts. He just kind of looked ahead and bowed his head a little bit when the judge read the verdict from the jury, guilty on all counts.
During the trial, I was scared to testify because I didn't know if he might be found not guilty. But once the trial was over and he was put away, then I wasn't worried anymore.
Lisa is very, very brave and is an incredible survivor. To have come through such an abusive relationship survived the aftermath of that, the violence of that, stood up in court and given her evidence, and lives another day. She is the hero of this story.
The verdict brought justice for Paige's friends and family, but also some sense of relief for Lisa.
It was a closure for me when he was found guilty, because it's part of my life that's over, and I don't ever have to worry about him or think about him. It's over for good.
Lester Ralph Jones was sentenced to life in prison without parole. He has never admitted to or explained what he did to Paige Bergfeld.
Based on all the years that have gone by, I'm not sure if we'll ever figure out exactly what happened to Paige Bergfeld. It would take the person convicted in her death to decide to start talking before we get any more information about what happened that night.
Sometimes I feel embarrassed, Sometimes I feel, my God, I could have died, very easily. And I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how I feel. I just feel like I'm lucky to be alive, that I'm the one that survived him and she didn't. I don't know.
Tampa Bay, Florida, 1984. Divorced from his wife and... Florida, 1984. In just over 5 months, Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office had discovered the bodies of 6 women, but they hadn't identified the perpetrator. Bobby Joe Long was free to continue.
nothing. Nothing. Wait, well, we back now. What the hell? I mean,